This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Let's do it. So the trade deadline is here. We are getting very, very close to it, and there are questions about if the Browns will be a participant in it. Well, let's talk about the trade deadline. And let's start by IDing some problems for this team. All right. So if you're looking at problem areas for this team where you could identify a trade: quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, running back, linebacker, defensive back with Greg Newsome being hurt, and maybe you could consider edge depth as another part where you can improve the team going forward. By the way, thank you guys for saying some nice things in chat. I see Willow's in here, Browns 3, Josh is in here saying D-Hop and a right tackle. Somebody's saying Jerry Jeudy. Somebody's saying we need to replace Jedrick Wills. Just Say Rain says QSPN on Bleacher Report now. Yes, sir. We are here. We are here. Some people saying Wills is garbage. A lot of input about what the Browns should do. So those are the problem areas, right? Quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, running back, linebacker, defensive back, edge depth. Do you guys think in the chat there is anything else that needs to be added to that list? Let me know as we continue to go forward. I'm seeing a lot of quarterback. I'm seeing a lot of offensive tackle. I'm seeing a lot of wide receivers. All right, so we're pretty much all in agreement here. So before we go about trading, we also have to look at what's on the roster. If we aren't happy with what's happening at the top of the position, we have to look at the roster. Now, let's start with quarterback, because quarterback is one of those spots where it's tricky about trading for one, because you don't know what you don't know where DTR is. You don't know if he's in a good place, in a bad place, if he's ready to play, if he's not. We have not seen DTR since he's looked terrible against the Baltimore Ravens. So you're in an iffy spot with him. You move over to PJ Walker, and it kind of is what it is scenario with him, right? Now, to be fair to PJ, I think the expectations for a backup quarterback have been met to some level. In the NFL, when you have a backup quarterback, the best thing you can hope for is that you have a quarterback who can keep you in the game no matter what happens for 4 quarters. PJ, for better or worse, he's been in the game. When he's been in the game, you've been able to compete for 4 quarters. Now, are you going to win in spite of your backup quarterback? Yes, obviously. Every time you win a game with your backup quarterback, you're winning in spite of your backup quarterback, no matter who that is, because he's not your starter. But PJ's kind of a normal mid to low tier backup. I think some people would like a Jacoby Brissett, who we saw be a high tier, almost questionable to be a starter level quarterback play. I think people like how Jacoby takes care of the ball. Even though Jacoby did throw some late game interceptions last year, I think people are also like the size of Jacoby Brissett. The fact that he's big helps, right? That he's a 6'5", 230 guy. It helps you on short yardage. It helps them see some of those easier throws that they want to go to. For example, 3rd and 3. At the end of a game, maybe if it's Jacoby Brissett throwing that football, it doesn't get batted up in the air and intercepted. When you have a smaller quarterback, you are going to be more prone to those turnovers. Somebody said a Mike Evans trade. He's in the last year of his contract. Ryan Tannehill, he's dealing with injury issues, so I don't think you want to add another quarterback with injury issues. Can we get value out of Amari Cooper for a younger guy? Right now, I don't think you can afford to trade Amari Cooper because he's too valuable to the offense demo. But Back to the main point with quarterback, you have to evaluate your situation. The first question the Cleveland Browns need to really be realistic about is this Deshaun Watson thing going to take at max till we get to Denver or at minimum till we get to Denver? If you think Deshaun Watson at max is going to be out till Denver, I don't think you make a move to trade for a quarterback. If you think Deshaun Watson is at minimum going to miss until Denver, which I think that's where the situation is, then you got to start thinking about what you want to do. The second question, once you get to that point, is if you feel like Deshaun Watson is going to be out at least 4 to 5 weeks, do you feel good about DTR playing potentially more so than PJ Walker? If you feel like DTR, if you give him a week of prep, if you give him time to get on sync with his receivers, can be better than what PJ has given you, then I can see a world where you say, hey, let's not add to this situation, add more cap to the quarterback room, throw more resources at the quarterback room where we've already thrown a ton into them, and make a bad situation worse by potentially trading for somebody. Another reason that you have to think about when you're trading for a quarterback is that it's not like any other position. You bring in somebody to play quarterback, they're probably not going to play for a month, right? They're going to need about a month or at least 2 weeks to get comfortable. So if that's the case, where are you at with Watson? If you think Watson's only going to be out for a month and you trade for a quarterback who's going to be back in a month, then what are we really doing? It's a question you have to ask yourself, right? It's not as simple as just trade for a guy and plug him in. So the quarterback one, it's a little bit iffy on if they'll do that, if I'm being honest with you. So look at wide receiver. If you look at the on-roster solutions for wide receivers, they're basically non-existent. It's Cedric Tillman and David Bell, two young players where you don't know 100% what you're really going to get out of those guys in year one, and you don't really want to be in a position to rely on them. So non-options, I think you're wide open at wide receiver to make a move. Running back, I think you do have a good a good on-roster solution for running back. I know a lot of people wanted to go for Derrick Henry. I know a lot of people wanted to go for a bigger name running back. But I think what we saw from the Browns versus a very good Seattle Seahawks defensive front is very encouraging from a running game perspective. I think that if you're going to make a move at running back, I think it would be kind of pointless. I think you have enough there at running back. Kareem Hunt is your short yardage guy. Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford are going to rotate in and out as your home run hitters. I like that. I like that for this team going forward. I think they needed to find their rotation. For a while, they were going Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt. They finally threw Pierre Strong into that rotation, and I think that's exactly what it needed. That way, you're not relying on one guy to carry the bulk of the load. You're splitting those carries between three guys who are more apt to splitting carries, right? Kareem Hunt, at this point in his career, he's better when he can split carries. Pierre Strong, he's better when he can split carries. Jerome Ford, he's better when he can split carries. We don't really need a feature back. I think you have three guys who are okay splitting carries, and now that you have that three-man rotation, you'll be fine. Now that they're giving up on the dream of like Jerome Ford being a feature back. Defensive back, given that Greg Newsome gets injured every other week, it's been a little bit difficult for them. And we've seen this secondary kind of fall apart late in games because of it. Their on roster solution is right now Cam Mitchell. You feel okay about that? But I really wouldn't be surprised if we are surprised that the Browns made a move at defensive back. So keep your eyes open. Defensive back, that's interesting. That's an interesting one to think about. Another interesting position to think about is edge for a trade. Because, quiet as kept, Alex Wright been another guy who's been on and off the injury report all year. He comes in, he gets hurt. Not really 100% sure what's going on with him there. So with Isaiah McGuire not really being a real option for extra edge depth, I would consider throwing edge in there. So we look at this team, we look at their needs. You can make an argument for trading for a quarterback, especially if it's the right situation. You can make a really good argument for getting a wide receiver. Running back, not much of an argument there. Offensive line, tons of arguments. You don't even have that many on-roster solutions. So you feel good about that, especially when you're trying to figure out what's going on with DeJuan Jones. He left the game, came back, figure out if he's okay. Linebacker, you can make an argument to make a trade there. And edge and DB are questionable. So those are the positions in which you would be looking for. I think also what you need to look for when it comes to making these trades is, who do you have? What do you have? What assets do you have to move? Draft picks, players. What do you have that's appealing to other teams, and what teams are selling? Oftentimes, when we have these conversations about trades, we have these trade conversations on one side, right? We're like, oh, this makes sense for the Browns. The Browns should make this trade. And we never consider if that trade makes sense for anybody else. Now, real quick, I see some people in chat talking about bringing in Case Keenum. Don't think that's going to be much of a difference for you. Like, I think for the Browns, if you're going to trade for a quarterback and go through all the mess of bringing in a new quarterback, I don't think you do it for Carson Wentz, who turns the ball over as much as PJ Walker or Case Keenum, who is done at this point of his career. Like Jacoby Brissett or nothing, right? Maybe Teddy Bridgewater. Thought somebody bring up Teddy Bridgewater. Maybe, but he hasn't been in this system. So I don't think you would, even though he did play for Kevin way back in the day. But yeah, it would have to be somebody with a lot of familiarity and somebody on that level. Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, about as low as you're going to go. And those teams want to keep Jacoby Brissett and Teddy Bridgewater. So we have to consider those other two things, though, right? What do you have to trade? What do you have to give somebody? And who is actually selling? Now, y'all could drop teams in there. Y'all want Jameis? Y'all want somebody drop Jameis in there? Y'all want to get Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold? If your issues are turning the ball over, none of these quarterbacks that you guys are suggesting are not going to turn the ball over. Right? Like, that's just Andy Dalton at this point of his career, Jameis Winston. Like, again, Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, about as low as you'll go on a trade. But if you can't get those two, I don't really think it makes sense. So who is buying? Who's selling? Right now on my list of teams that are selling, you have the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings are on this list because their quarterback tore his Achilles. They are selling now. The New England Patriots don't know what they have to sell, but they're selling. Denver Broncos, they're selling. Maybe the Las Vegas Raiders. It could go either way. They're one game below 500. The New York Giants are absolutely sellers at this point. The LA Rams are sellers. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may or may not be sellers because they're still in the race for the division. They're not a very good team. And also keep in mind, you want to look at teams that have bad records that also aren't super young. So like a Carolina Panthers team that's obviously awful. They're not selling because they don't have anything to sell at this point. They have all young players. Same thing with the Houston Texans or even the Arizona Cardinals. They're not really selling any of the players they have on the roster because they already sold. So those are the teams with pieces that you would like that might be selling. One thing you noticed on that list, there was no Washington Commanders there. There's no Detroit Lions there. I don't think any of the teams that you need to be selling in order to get a Jacoby Brissett or a Teddy Bridgewater are willing to sell right now. So you will not be able to get Jacoby Brissett or Teddy Bridgewater. I don't think you find a way where it makes enough sense for both sides to make that trade, even though if you could, I think they would. But you can't just assume that these trades make sense for the Browns. You have to make sure that these trades make sense for everyone involved. I know somebody didn't bring up no Colt McCoy. Come on, man. We ain't off that narcotic yet with Colt McCoy. All right. So here are some trade targets I have. Feel free to throw some trade targets that you feel like are realistic in the chat below. Shout out to the Bleacher Report gang here watching me. So I have somebody like Ezra Cleveland, former tackle prospect, currently plays guard for the Minnesota Vikings. That's somebody who is a trade candidate. Someone says, is Malik Willis worse than PJ Walker? I would think that you would rather have PJ Walker than Malik Willis. Again, you can say what you want about PJ Walker, but 2-1, you've been in every game you played with him. You can do a lot worse at the backup position than PJ Walker. I think we need to be realistic about what the truth is about backup quarterback, and what you're getting out of PJ Walker is actually one of the better case scenarios. So I wouldn't go so far as to say like anybody is better than PJ. I think it has to make sense. So first guy, Ezra Cleveland. One, he could be a tackle. He could play left tackle for you. Very athletic guy. Just didn't get the opportunity to play left tackle in Minnesota. He's somebody who could easily play that left tackle position for you, hold it down, and be an insurance policy for Jed Wills. Also, somebody who can kind of just be a perfect swing tackle, swing guy. He can play guard. He could play tackle. He could play center. He can basically play all 5 positions on the offensive line. And if you have an injury go down, he can fill in nicely, whether it be on left or right. He could be somebody who can help you out at there. So Ezra Cleveland, Minnesota Vikings. Since Kirk Cousins is out, that definitely looks like something that can be done, right? He's not going to be highly valued. Maybe you throw like a 4th. Maybe you see if they're interested in Donovan Peoples-Jones, because if you look at this roster and you ask yourself, who on this Browns roster can be traded that has value to other teams, right? Because we always talk about quarterbacks on the roster. I mean, not quarterbacks, players on the roster who we want traded that nobody wants. But who on this roster can be traded and has value? I look on this roster and I see one guy whose name pops out. He's not being used right now. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. It's Donovan Peoples-Jones. So maybe you think, hey, you could throw a 5th and a Donovan Peoples-Jones at the Vikings. They get a chance to bring in a guy who they might want in free agency. No, Tennessee's not selling. You get a chance to look into a guy that you might want to bring in free agency and see if you want to bring him in if you're the Minnesota Vikings long term. Get a free preview. And you get a 5th round pick for your troubles. I think it makes a ton of sense for both sides. You can make that move. For the Browns, you will get at the very least a very good backup option at all of your tackle positions. I mean, all of your offensive line positions. You'll feel really, really good about that. Now, to people who are still talking about quarterback, we'll talk about Jacoby. Now, I think it's important to also understand, well, not also, I think it's important that we are real about the situation. It does not matter which backup is in there. If a backup plays for the rest of the year, we know that the season has a ceiling. It could be PJ Walker. It could be Josh Dobbs. It could be Jacoby Brissett. If Deshaun Watson does not get back in here and play well, this team has an obvious ceiling. And I don't think that ceiling changes much more no matter who's out there. If it's not Deshaun, maybe you can make the argument that DTR could be like the next Brock Purdy or whatever it is. But outside of those kind of arguments being made, no matter who you bring in, the season still rests on the ability of Deshaun Watson to play and get healthy. You're not going to trade for somebody who's going to be an elite quarterback. You already made that trade and you're trying to see if that trade is going to work out. So you just want somebody who can hold the boat down because they've already invested in Deshaun. Whether we like it or not, that's the world we live in. They've invested in Deshaun Watson. That's the trade that's going to be made. Real quick, chat, I'm going to put a poll in to see if y'all would like the Ezra Cleveland trade, or what players do y'all think can be traded on this team. Somebody said Cordero Patterson. Don't think it makes sense for the Browns because he's primarily a running back now. I think that wouldn't make sense. Marcus Mariota is somebody wants to bring in for backup quarterback. I think Marcus Mariota is just as bad as having PJ Walker, if I'm being honest with you. He's just a name we're familiar with, but functionally, he's bad. I watched him play in Minnesota. He's not good. Devin White. Somebody said Juju. I wouldn't mind Juju. I mean, he has a lot of baggage, but I wouldn't mind Juju at this point. Q, if DTR plays the rest of the season, does the play calling shift more to what it was like last year? That's another thing that they need to determine, right? This is why I say it's important to get a read on if you think Deshaun's going to come back before a certain point. I think if this thing looks like it's going to go past the Broncos game, you need to change the offense and let DTR play. But let's talk about Jacoby. And I think the reality of Jacoby or Teddy Bridgewater, that level of backup quarterback that you could bring in, it really doesn't make sense for the Lions. It really doesn't make sense for the Commanders. The Commanders have Sam Howell. They feel good about Sam Howell, but they want an insurance and policy just in case Sam Howell gets hurt. They're still trying to win. Their season's not over. They're probably going to hang on to Jacoby Brissett for that insurance. They paid him $8 million to do that. So they're going to want him to do that. So I just don't think Jacoby Brissett's going to be somebody you can get. Teddy Bridgewater, same deal. Not the Vikings. The Lions are winning right now. And since they're winning, they're going to want to keep their backup quarterback. No need to trade him. They're going to stay and pant there. Derrick Henry. It's a name I saw a lot. We know that's not happening now at this point, but it doesn't even make sense for the Titans. The cap relief isn't worth it. It just would make them worse for no good reason. Jerry Jeudy. This makes sense for the Broncos to trade Jerry Jeudy. The question is, does it make sense to pay the price for Jerry Jeudy if you're the Browns? Do you feel like you can fit him in? And this is a serious question for everybody who wants Jerry Jeudy. We're having a hard time getting Elijah Moore the ball. We're having an ultra difficult time getting David Njoku the ball. We're having a difficult time getting Donovan Peoples-Jones the ball. There is a question of is there even enough room in this receiver room to add a Jerry Jeudy and to fix the problems that Jerry Jeudy has been having? Somebody said Ryan Tannehill, you're already dealing with the injury-prone quarterback. You don't want to add another one in there. So, what happens if Deshaun's hurt and Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, and then you're back to PJ Walker? So you would have traded all that for no reason. You know what I mean? So I just don't think trading for Tannehill makes any sense given what you're dealing with. And I'm not saying our wide receiver room is stacked. I'm saying we're having enough time trying to get the most out of Elijah Moore right now. We're having a hard enough time trying to get the most out of so many other wide receivers at this. I mean, like other receivers. Like we haven't even scratched the surface of what we can do with David Njoku yet. And we're talking about bringing in Jerry Jeudy, where he's not going to have a defined role. And that's another thing to consider, like a DeAndre Hopkins. If you bring in a DeAndre Hopkins, you know that he's going to have a defined role, that he's going to have things that he can do that nobody else in that receiver room can do. So you can draw up specific things for him. Jerry Jeudy, there's like 3 other guys like that on this team. I don't think you get Jerry Jeudy. Somebody said Devontae Adams. Would the Browns go after Devontae Adams? If you could get Devontae Adams and it wouldn't cost you an arm and a leg, sure. Why not? Why would you say no to Devontae Adams? But let's be realistic. You're not getting Devontae Adams. That's a dream. That's a dream. Also, the Giants aren't selling their 2nd round pick this year. So I saw somebody throwing Jalen Hyatt. No, they're not. They're not selling him. Will Fuller ain't even in the league. So, yeah. That's where I'm at with Jerry Jeudy. I think it does make sense to go after D-Hop for the Browns. It doesn't make sense for the Titans right now. I think if you're a Browns fan, and I'm being realistic with you, and you're sitting there at the trade deadline, and you're asking me right now, what position groups should I expect if the Browns make a move, those positions will be in. I think the highest probability is offensive line. I think the second highest is wide receiver. And I think the third highest is linebacker. I think it's possible that they trade for a linebacker. And if they trade for a linebacker, it will probably be somebody that they liked in the draft that didn't go to them and that they're going to give a second chance. I would throw edge in there at wild card, and I would throw defensive back in there at wild card. If I'm being honest about everything that I feel about what this team's going to do, I think they're standing pat at quarterback. I think they feel like DTR and Deshaun Watson are their solutions if PJ Walker does not play well. I think they feel fine with what they have at running back. And I think they feel fine with what they have elsewhere. Let's also remember, Andrew Berry's not going to be one to make a move out of desperation. Jalen Johnson from the Bears is also another suggestion someone brought up. But Andrew Berry's not going to make moves out of desperation. That's why he's a good GM. That's why he's been able to get good compensation, because he's not going to be willing to make some desperation moves. And I think they will be calm about this at the trade deadline. I think it's more likely than it's not that they stand pat. But if they do go after a position, I think it will be wide receiver, linebacker, offensive line. Look for those 3 positions.